There is a particular sound a 9-year-old makes when she is trying not to cry in front of you, and it is quieter than crying, and it is worse. I heard it from my daughter on the night my mother decided that a child's mistake was more embarrassing than a grown woman's cruelty. And it is the reason I am telling you this story, because I did something that night I had never done in 39 years. And it started with my little girl putting a violin back in its case and telling me it was fine. My name is Colette. I run a small cafe on a corner in a neighborhood where people still know each other's orders. Nothing fancy. I bake, I make the coffee, I wipe the tables. And for most of my life, my other job, the unpaid one, has been managing my mother. My mother is named Vivian. And Vivian is the kind of woman who can make you feel small while smiling at you, so that afterward you cannot even explain what happened, only that you left the room feeling like less than you walked in with. I know that feeling from the inside because I grew up on the receiving end of it. I remember being about WREN'S age, winning a small ribbon at school for a watercolor I had worked on for a week. I brought it home so proud I could barely hold still. And my mother looked at it, and the only thing she said was that the sky was the wrong blue. Not a word about the ribbon, just the blue. I spent the rest of that evening looking at a sky I had been happy with an hour earlier and seeing only the mistake. That is the whole trick of a woman like my mother. She does not tell you that you failed. She just finds the one wrong note and makes sure it is the only thing left ringing in the room. I grew up translating her, softening her. At every family gathering, I was the one who cooked, who smoothed the moment, who caught the cruel thing she said and set it down gently before it could land. I told myself I was keeping the peace. What I was actually doing was teaching everyone, including eventually my own daughter, that Vivian's cruelty was a kind of weather you simply learn to dress for. I got so good at it that I did not notice I had started teaching my daughter to stand still and take it too. Her name is Wren. She is 9. And about a year ago, she started learning the violin. I want to be clear about her level, because it matters. She is a beginner. There is no secret genius here. She is a little girl who can play 4 or 5 short pieces from beginning to end if the room is quiet and nobody is staring. That is exactly what a year of violin looks like on a normal child, and I think it is one of the most ordinary and beautiful things in the world. When my mother's 65th birthday started coming up, Wren decided entirely on her own that she wanted to learn Vivian's favorite old song and play it for her. I asked her once why that song, out of everything, and she told me that when she was little, before she could even really remember, Grandma used to hum it to her. She did not remember it happening. She just knew the tune lived somewhere far back in her, and she had figured out it came from Vivian, and she wanted to give it back to her, grown into something real, on a violin. That was the whole reason. My daughter wanted to hand her grandmother back one of the few warm things she could remember Vivian giving her, and she had no idea she was walking toward a closed door. She worked on it for weeks. After school, at the kitchen table, with the music propped against the sugar bowl, a lot of that work happened at the cafe. She would come in after school and set up at the little corner table by the window, and the regulars got used to her, the small, serious girl doing her scales between the coffee orders. One of my morning regulars, an old man who comes in for tea and a scone every single day, started asking after her progress like she was his own granddaughter. That cafe is a warm place. People root for each other there. I mention it because I want you to understand what world my daughter came from, so you understand what world she walked into at that hotel. There was one night I came home late from closing up and found her still at the table, past her bedtime, playing the same short passage over and over, and getting it wrong the same way each time, her eyes bright and frustrated, in the way that means a child is about 30 seconds from deciding she is stupid. She told me she was never going to get it. She wanted to quit the whole song. And I sat down on the floor next to her chair, and I told her that the hard bar was hard for everybody, and that the only difference between the kids who play it and the kids who do not is that some of them stay at the table 10 more minutes. She stayed 10 more minutes. She did not get it that night. But she got it 2 nights later, and the way she came running into the cafe to tell me is a thing I will keep in my chest until I die. That is what my mother was about to wave away. That. And here's the part one need you to hold on to. My mother knew. Wren had asked her, weeks before, if she could play something at the birthday dinner, 5 minutes, before the cake. And Vivian had said yes. It was arranged. My daughter had permission. If you have ever watched your own child pour weeks of quiet, hopeful work into pleasing someone who was never going to let themselves be pleased, then you already know the specific dread I was carrying into that party, even before anything went wrong. The birthday was at a little hotel, in a small event room my mother's friend Estelle had suggested. And of course my mother asked me to bring the desserts, the ones I make at the cafe, for free, boxed up and driven across town, because that is the arrangement we have always had and never once discussed out loud. I said yes. I always said yes. I want to know who is out there with me tonight. Drop a comment and tell me the city you are watching from and the hour where you are. I would especially like to hear from the people who spent their childhood being told the sky they painted was the wrong blue. I did not know yet that this was the last party where I would say yes to all of it. We got there early so Wren could see the room. She wanted to do a quick run-through in the empty space, to get used to how it sounded, the way her teacher had told her real musicians do. She stood up at the front of that little event room, this small, serious person, with a rented violin, and she started to play to the empty chairs. And she was doing well. She was steady. And then the door opened and my mother came in with 2 of her friends, earlier than we expected, and everything changed in the room. Wren faltered. Having an audience arrive suddenly is hard for a nervous child, and she stumbled in the middle of the piece, and she stopped, and she took a breath, and started that section again. Which is exactly what she had practiced. Stop, breathe, find your place, keep going. That was the whole skill. That was the thing she was proud of learning. But my mother did not see a child practicing a skill. She turned to Estelle and the other woman, and I watched her face do the thing it does, that small tightening around the mouth, and she said something to them, light and low, with a little laugh, and gestured at Wren the way you gesture at something that is running a bit long. She introduced my daughter to her friends, not as a granddaughter about to play, but as an explanation, an apology in advance. And Wren, up front, heard the tone even if she did not catch the words, and she lowered the violin and stood there not knowing whether to keep going. A little while later, my mother called me out into the hallway. She told me the program was running long and that we were going to have to cut Wren's performance. She said it lightly, like it was a scheduling matter, like she was a little sorry about it, and I did the thing I have always done. I reminded her that Wren had been practicing for weeks, that it was 5 minutes, that it had been promised. I said it gently, still smoothing. Estelle actually put her head out into the hallway at one point to ask if everything was all right, and my mother's whole face changed for the half second the door was open, smoothed itself into the gracious hostess, and then dropped again the moment it closed. I saw the switch happen. I saw how easily she wore the warm face for the people she wanted to impress and took it off for the ones she did not have to. And my mother, because she thought it was just the 2 of us again, told me the truth. She said she did not want my daughter turning her party into a child's recital in front of her friends. She said that when Wren could play a little more properly, we would all listen another time. I stood in that hallway, and I looked at the actual program in my hand. Estelle had a 20-minute slideshow. 2 of my mother's friends had speeches down for the evening. There was time. There was so much time. This was never about time. It was about a 9-year-old possibly stumbling in front of the women my mother wanted to impress, and my mother deciding the safest thing for her own image was to make sure my daughter simply did not play at all. And I felt the old machinery start up in me. The reflex, I could feel the compromise forming in my mouth. Maybe Wren could play just one short, easy piece. Maybe at the very end. I was already, automatically, negotiating my own child down to a size that would not embarrass her grandmother. And that is exactly when I saw that Wren had come looking for me. She was in the doorway. She had heard enough. Not all of it, but enough. She did not cry. That was the part that took the floor out from under me. She walked over and she started putting her violin back in its case, carefully, settling it into the felt, and she told me it was okay. She told me she would just play it for me at home instead. She was comforting me. And I understood, standing there holding a box of desserts I had made for free, what my daughter had actually learned that night. She had not learned that her grandmother was being unfair. She had learned that she, Wren, was not good enough yet. That the shame was hers to carry and to tidy away so no adult had to feel it. She had learned it because I taught it to her. I flashed back on every single time. The school show my mother did not come to, and how I told Wren that Grandma was just tired. The birthday she left early, and how I said Grandma did not like big crowds. Wren's very first little recital last year, after which my mother said nothing about the courage it took an 8-year-old to stand up there at all, only which 2 notes had been wrong, and how I drove my daughter home and explained that Grandma noticed those things because she wanted Wren to improve. Every time I had translated my mother into something survivable. Grandma is just hard to please. She does not know how to show her feelings. She actually wants you to do better. I had spent years handing my daughter reasons to accept being treated badly and telling myself it was protection. It was not. I was raising the next woman in our family who would one day teach her own child to quietly put away the things that mattered to her. I did not make a scene in that hotel. That is not what happened, and I am glad it is not, because the point was never to burn my mother down in front of her friends. The point was my daughter. But I did not sneak out the back, either. I carried those dessert boxes into the main room myself, and I set them on the table in front of everyone, because I had said I would bring them, and I keep my word even to people who do not keep theirs. And then, in front of Estelle and the friends and the aunts and everyone who had come, I did not announce anything or make a speech. I simply took my daughter's hand, and I found my mother's eye across that room, and I told her, quietly but loudly enough for the nearest table to hear, that the desserts were here but that Wren and I would not be staying. She followed me toward the door. She told me, under her breath, that I was punishing her on her own birthday. And I told her the truest thing I have ever said to my mother. I told her that Wren was not ashamed of making a mistake. That my mother was the one ashamed of Wren making a mistake. And that I was not going to sit at that table and teach my daughter, one more time, that this was normal, that this was love, that this was just how family treats you. I felt the whole room not looking at us the way people don't look when they are hearing everything. A couple of the aunts found something very interesting in their drinks. Nobody stood up for us. Nobody said a word. But I saw one of my cousins catch my eye and give me the smallest nod, the kind you give when you agree but do not have the courage to say so out loud, and honestly, that tiny nod was more than my family had given me in years. Then I took my little girl's hand, and we walked out through the lobby, past the front desk, out into the parking lot. Wren carried her own violin case against her chest with both arms the whole way, the way you carry something you are afraid someone is going to take. My mother did not come after us. Nobody did. I buckled my daughter into the back seat in the quiet of that lot, and her face in the rearview mirror as I pulled out is a thing I am not going to be able to describe to you, so I am not going to try. There was no second celebration waiting for us. On the way home, Wren was silent in the back seat, and about halfway there she asked me in a small voice whether Grandma was mad at her. I told her no. I could tell she did not fully believe me, and that broke something in me that I am still not sure has healed. We went home and had soup out of a can, standing up in the kitchen, because neither of us had the heart to make anything real. She did not want to open her violin case that night, and I did not make her. It sat by the door where she had dropped it. Some nights the win is just going home and letting a child be quiet, and not asking her to perform being okay on top of everything else. A week later, something happened that I did not arrange, and I want to be clear about that, because it matters. Wren's violin teacher held an end-of-term recital for all her students, in the small meeting room of our local library. This was not a rescue mission somebody cooked up to fix my daughter's feelings. It had been on the calendar for months, long before the birthday. Ordinary. A handful of kids, some folding chairs, a plastic table of juice and store cookies afterward. Wren was going to play her 4 pieces, the one she knew cold. And the morning of it, she asked me whether she should add the song, the hard one, the one she had learned for her grandmother and never got to play. I told her it was her choice, and I meant it, and I did not push either way. We got to the library and sat through the other children first, and I could feel Wren getting more nervous with every kid who went up, her hands pressed flat on her knees. A little boy ahead of her froze completely in the middle of his piece and had to be gently walked off and brought back later, and I watched my daughter watch that happen, and I saw her decide something behind her eyes, though I could not tell you what. Before she went up, she leaned over to me and she asked me a question that I will carry for the rest of my life. She asked me, very quietly, whether people would laugh if she made a mistake, and I did not give her my mother's answer. I did not tell her to just be perfect so no one could laugh. I told her that if she made a mistake, she already knew exactly what to do. She would stop and breathe and find her place and keep going, the same as she had 100 times at our kitchen table. And I told her the people who came to a library on a Saturday morning to hear a room full of beginners were not there hunting for wrong notes. They were there for the children. They were there for her. She got up. She walked to the front with her knees visibly a little unsteady. She tucked the violin under her chin, and there was a long second where I genuinely did not know if she was going to be able to start at all. And then she started. She played her 4 pieces, steady and careful, better than she had ever played them at home. And then, on her own, without looking at me for permission, she lifted the bow again and began the song. And in the middle of it, she really did miss a note. I watched it happen. I watched my 9-year-old's face tighten, that same tightening I had spent my life smoothing over in her grandmother, except on Wren, it was not calculation, it was fear. The pure fear of a child who thinks she has just failed in front of people. She stopped. For a second, the whole room seemed to hold its breath with her. And then, she took a breath, the way we had practiced, and she found her place, and she finished the song. The room clapped. Her teacher, the other children's families, a couple of relatives who had come out for it. It was not a standing ovation, and there were no tears streaming down anyone's face. It was better than that, because it was real. It was ordinary people being genuinely glad, in a library, on a Saturday morning, for a little girl who got lost in the middle of something hard and found her own way back out. My mother did not come. She had been told about it, the date and the time, well in advance. She chose not to. And this is the part one am proudest of, more even than leaving the hotel. Because when Wren noticed her grandmother's empty chair, I did not reach for the old translations. I did not say Grandma probably got the date confused. I did not hand my daughter one more soft excuse to fold up and swallow. I told her the truth. I told her that we had invited Grandma, and that Grandma had chosen not to come, and that it did not mean one single thing about how well she played. It was sad. It was also true. And for the first time in my daughter's life, I let it be both of those things at once, instead of turning it into a puzzle she had to solve by finding a way it was somehow her own fault. She was disappointed. But she did not blame herself, and that was brand new. A few days after the recital, my mother came by the cafe, in the quiet hour. I was behind the counter finishing with my last customer, the old man who has his tea and scone every day, and my mother stood off to the side and waited, which is not something she does, waiting, and I made her wait. I finished with him properly, walked him to the door the way I always do, and only then did I turn to her. She told me some of the family had heard about what happened at the hotel, and were looking at her differently, and she wanted me to explain to them that it had only been a change in the program. I would not do it. I told her I was not going around bad-mouthing her to anyone, and that was true. But I told her I was also not going to rewrite what my daughter had lived through, in order to make her grandmother look better in front of the family. She defended herself first. She said Wren had not been ready. She said children get so terribly upset when they make mistakes in public, and that she had only been trying to protect her. And I told her the thing that finally landed. I told her she had not protected Wren at all. She had protected herself in front of her friends, and she had been willing to use my daughter's heart to do it. She did not have an answer for that at first. She stood in my empty cafe and looked at the corner table by the window, Wren's table, and something in her face moved. And then she told me a thing I had never heard in my life. She told me that when she was a girl she had wanted to sing, that she had loved the church choir more than anything, and that after one rehearsal her own mother had told her, in front of people, that her voice was not good enough for the front, and that she had never once sung in front of anyone again, not even in the car. She said it flatly, the way you say a thing you have kept in a locked drawer for 50 years. She was not asking me to feel sorry for her, and I did, standing there. But I also understood, in that moment, exactly where the cold red pen in our family had come from, and how close I had come to handing it down one more time. Seeing it, that clearly took away my last excuse for staying in it. I told her I was sorry that it happened to her, and that it was exactly why I would not let it keep happening to my daughter. She did not suddenly transform, and she did not offer some big apology. But before she left, she asked me for the video. The one of Wren playing at the library. I did not send it. I told her she was welcome to hear the song from Wren directly, but that she was going to have to be the one to ask my daughter for it herself, out loud. About 2 weeks later, she did. She called ahead, which she never does, and she came to the house. She sat down on the edge of the couch, stiff, holding her purse in her lap like a woman in a waiting room, and she asked Wren, directly, whether she still wanted to play the song she had learned for her birthday. Wren looked at her, and instead of saying yes right away, she told her the truth. She said that sometimes she still stopped in the middle of it. My mother was quiet for a moment, and then she said that if Wren stopped, she would wait. I have replayed that small sentence more than almost anything else in this whole story. If you stop, I will wait. So Wren got out her violin. She tuned it, slowly, her small face very serious, while her grandmother sat there with her purse in her lap. And she played the song in our living room for her grandmother, with me sitting quietly nearby. And she did hit a wrong note, and her face pulled tight, and she kept going. And this time my mother did not wince. She did not correct her. She did not say one word about the note. She sat with her hands folded and she listened all the way to the end. When it was over, Vivian did not make a speech. She asked Wren, quietly, whether she had really learned that whole song just for her. Wren nodded, and my mother said that she should have listened the first time. Wren, being 9, did not sit with the weight of that the way an adult would have. She just brightened and offered to play another one because she knew that one even better. And my mother stayed in her chair and let her. I am not going to tell you it fixed everything, because that would be a lie. Vivian still says sharp things sometimes. A woman does not unlearn a whole life in one afternoon in a living room. The change is not really in her. It is in me. I do not translate her anymore. When she says something that lands wrong on my daughter, I name it plainly, in the moment, and I let Wren see me name it. Because that is the thing I most want my daughter to carry out of all of this. Not how to make a cold word survivable. How to stand on the outside of it and know it was never about her. At the school spring concert this year, my mother came, and she took a seat toward the back, which for a woman who used to skip these things entirely was its own quiet kind of progress. Wren saw her back there when she walked out on stage, but she did not play it for Vivian. She did not spend the whole performance searching the back row for one face to approve of her. She missed a note, and this time she did not even stop. She carried it straight through to the end, like the miss was simply part of the song now. Afterward, my mother told her she had listened all the way to the end, and Wren, grinning up at her, told her that this time she had not stopped at all. What my daughter needed through all of this was never a flawless performance, and in the end it was never even her grandmother's approval. It was a few adults in the room who would not look away the moment she got something wrong. So here is what I learned. Anyone can clap for the right notes. Real love is the person who stays in their seat through the wrong one, does not wince, and is still there when the song finds its way home. If you have ever been the child who stumbled and looked up to see who is still watching you with warmth, tell me who stayed in their seat for you. Put their name in the comments. The people who wait through our wrong notes are some of the best ones we ever get, and they deserve to be named out loud.